Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode number 230 of the Audible Farm podcast, and this episode is brought to you by the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association. Go to www.fdfineartsassociation.org. Find out more about the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association. They support any type of art you can imagine. Their website's great. They have a community calendar where you can find all sorts of events that are going on in the Fort Dodge area. They support music, live art. There's theater, there's musicals. I mean, you name it, any type of art, they're on it. It's a great place to be, so check them out. This episode, I'm sitting down with Mark Gales. Mark Gales is a sound technician, or in layman terms, he runs sound. He has his own sound system, and he knows a lot about it. And it's one of those things where I've played shows, Mark's been the sound guy before, or I've been at shows where he's been hired on by the band that I'm playing with, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, how do you get good at running sound? I mean, it makes sense you'd get good at playing music, because you just sit and practice. But like, how do you practice running sound, or like, how do you take those first steps? And we talk about that in this episode because he's got a fun backstory where he kind of talks about how he got involved in all that. And it's really kind of cool. I love sitting down and talking with Mark. You'll find out in the episode that we're just all over the place going on tangents, and that's just kind of how me and Mark talk. I hang out with him at shows when he's running sound. He's tons of fun, and I know for the most part everything's gonna be a-okay when Mark's around. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. Sorry for the long intro. This is episode 230 with Mark Gales.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
Sitting down today with Mark Gales, everybody. Mark is a sound engineer. That'd be the fancy word for it, right?
Yeah, I try.
Well, I mean, like, it's fun when you sit and think about like running sound. So everybody first starts out with like some tiny little mixer, right? And that's basically where a lot of people stay. They want to keep just regular mixer, just a couple little doodads and twist it. And then you get to see like what you're doing, and you're pushing buttons and the mixer's moving by itself. And there's, that stuff that's like, that's why you're a sound engineer. I'm one of those, I need buttons that I can twist and just know that they did what I told them to do. And when you start doing digital stuff, it's hard to figure out like, organization and things like that. But
well, luckily the digital world is just a compact version of the analog.
Okay.
So I started with the little Mackie 1604 16 channel board, working with local bands, the ski band.
Okay.
Saucy Jack was just starting out back then.
Yep.
We're talking back in the 90s.
Yes.
late mid 90s. And so then we had a small PA. And so we started doing sound for other bands that were coming from Iowa City and stuff that would come to Fort Dodge, and they would just show up with their instruments and play. So we started doing that, and we thought, okay, yeah, this is pretty fun. Then I got to know Andy Anderson a little bit. Andy Anderson had a bigger sound system, Concert Sound Productions. Andy's unfortunately passed away now. Mm-hmm. But from meeting him, we started getting involved with A-Bait.
Okay.
On the main stage and stuff like that.
All right, I want to dog ear at A-Bait. Yeah. I'm coming back to A-Bait.
But anyway,
I do want to, like, how did you, like, did you ever play music growing up?
Okay, so a little bit. I grew up with music. When I was little, my parents, there's back in the 70s, late 70s, my parents followed a country band around.
Okay.
And I was little, but it was at the Starlight. It was an all-age show, so I was 10 years old going to see country bands play at the Starlight. Cool. And my dad was always technical. He was the chief engineer at KVFD Television in Fort Dodge. We used to have a TV station back in the 70s.
Okay.
So my dad's always been around sound equipment. And so my dad would help. The band was Steve Bledsoe.
Okay.
Back in the 70s. So my dad would help them a little bit with their sound. Mm-hmm. And, so sitting there, I got, and I got to know what the speakers so I knew technically what stuff was, the soundboard, when I was just a kid.
Yeah.
And then from then he went to taught at Iowa Central. He taught broadcasting.
Oh,
So same
okay.
thing, they have tape recorders. I used to make cassettes for my friends.
Okay.
Because I had access to music from KICB, and
Oh,
so I would make,
okay.
the music they had at the time. I could make cassettes for my friends, so I understood gain structure,
Yeah.
and setting up levels, and I knew what compression was, compressors, gates. So
Yeah.
I knew all that stuff as I got older, as a teenager.
Yes.
Compression
Compression is your friend in
Yes,
radio
yeah.
vocals, for sure.
Yeah, so so it's kind of weird that I grew up with that as a youngster, and then I started dating. I knew Ed Wilson. He was a sound engineer for the ski band.
Okay, not the weather guy.
Right, not the weather guy. He lived in Clare. So I started dating his daughter, Amy, and I knew Ed, but I didn't know he did live sound. So the ski band opened up at the Larimar for Foghat or somebody big at the Larimar. Mm-hmm. And so I went with Amy. I just went to go there, and her dad was running sound for the opening band, and they sounded amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a ski band, and I was just, after that, I was hooked.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Dude, the fact that I was like 27 and thank God for the internet, I figured out like what a compressor was,
Okay.
in seriousness, like with audio and sound engineering, as opposed to just a guitar pedal compressor where you're kind of like, it's the same thing,
Yeah.
but it's not, So like, you knew all this stuff when you were like 10 years old, and there's like, I was just thinking about like how many 10-year-olds were still like putting VHS cassettes like into VCRs backwards and ruining it, and you're over here like dubbing tapes and stuff like
No,
that.
that's fun.
So that's cool. That explains a lot, like, as to why this seems second nature to you, as opposed to like a lot of other people where like, I mean, other people, we can all run sound. Anybody can run sound, but it doesn't always sound the best, and there's certain things you got to remember to do or to not do. And that's where like having that background, like your dad running sound, your dad doing things like that, and you dated a gal and her dad did stuff like that,
Right.
That's wild. It's crazy to know that like you've had that upbringing where like in a point in time where like that kind of technology was like high level, nowadays anybody can get anything to dub anything. Like most of this podcast has been recorded with less than $200 worth of equipment,
wow.
do just stuff like that, so it's like, but you're over here, like I said, have access to a lot of technology and things like that kind of led you down this road. But did you ever try to play music? Because I mean, we're basically you're still just running sound. Did you ever pick up a guitar, or did you play piano growing up or anything?
So it's a funny thing. So watching that band when I was younger, I always wanted to perform.
Yeah.
Right. I did learn how to play acoustic guitar. I went to St. Ed's Catholic school system here. So man, it was like 5th or 6th grade, I think I started learning to play guitar.
Okay.
So I played for church, school functions, Christmas stuff. But I was always too shy. I was fine playing with a group of people, like Guitar Master, be 4 or 5 of us playing guitars and singing. I was fine with that. But for me to go up there, and I never did play by myself solo, but I was always just a little bit shy and didn't quite have enough, courage or whatever it takes to do that.
Yeah. Insanity, maybe. I don't know what it is.
But I did. I used to play and sing, and I don't even know if I was any good or not. I have no idea. But I mean, I could play guitar okay, but just chords, open chords. I couldn't do any finger picking or anything like that, with notes. I could do some finger picking with chords, but nothing fancy.
That's still enough, though. Do you still have an acoustic? Do you still pluck around?
So funny story is, when I was in school, I had a really nice Yamaha acoustic guitar. It sounded really good back in the 80s even. And I had it forever. Unfortunately, after I moved away, became adult, it was sitting downstairs, and my dad accidentally sold my guitars without knowing the history behind it. I had all my books, notes, everything was in there. And then as an adult, right, as I got to be in my mid-20s, I started being around bands. I thought, hey, I'm going to pick up my guitar. I'm like, Dad, where's my guitar? Well, it should be down there somewhere. It was gone.
Oh, no.
So I was like kind of heartbroken. I'm like, oh, he sold my guitars. But I mean, I haven't played them in like 15 years or whatever, maybe even 20 years. But so anyway, I never did pick it back up again. I could still play a few chords. But,
Cool.
But once I started being around musicians like Jeremy Oberg and some other, I'm like, okay, I'm better off sitting back where I'm at doing sound because there's so many talented musicians, So yeah, I kind of stuck with more I stayed on the technical side. I think partly because I'm a shy person.
Yeah, I mean,
I wish I could have overcome that when I was little, but I never quite did.
Yeah, but honestly, the sound guy is like the dog musher. Everybody, and when you're doing the whole like, when you see dogs running in a pack with a dog musher, it's like, wow, look at all these dogs pulling this sled here. But it's actually like the guy in the back that you don't notice is the guy that's steering the ship, kind of, you know.
So that is interesting because I've done shows where there's multiple bands, like 3 or 4 bands, and usually they're rock bands. And I do kind of have to be the director to some point, like get them up on stage, get them set up, do sound check and stuff. And sometimes, especially with guitars, they can be extremely loud on their amps, you know. So I have to, unfortunately, I have to be the volume Nazi sometimes and say, guys, okay, you sound great, but all I hear is your guitar. You got to turn down a little bit. And I've had people argue with, well, that's my sound. I got to have it. I'm like, just work with me. But so I get them to turn down. And the funny thing is, and it's happened when we used to have Patty's Pub on First Avenue South. I have bands that they fought me a little bit with the volume. And then at the end of the night, they came to me and they're like, wow, I could hear everything.
Yeah.
You know, they could hear their guitar, they could hear the vocals, the drums, the bass, they could hear the whole mix because he turned down enough to where his guitar wasn't overpowering everything.
Yep. And,
you know,
and you rely on the monitor.
Yeah.
And,
you know, and I still had his guitar in the mix so he could still hear the room. Sorry.
No, that's cool.
But so, yeah, so sometimes it resonated. So sometimes it works out in their favor to listen to me. So I don't try to be like, I understand there needs to be stage volume for power, for energy. So I get that. So I'm not trying to say, okay, well, you just got to be so I can barely hear it. No, I need that energy, but there's a point where it can be over the top, you know?
Yes. Okay. So like, that's a perfect topic to bring up because we've had 80 billion guitarists on this podcast.
They probably hate me right now.
I think you might be the only, no, there's been like one other sound person on here.
Oh no.
Same concept though. I think they brought it up as well, but like I've run into that so much. I play in a punk band down in Des Moines, nothing against John. He plays loud. He likes to play loud. It's the energy thing. It's just how he feels what he's playing. And it makes a lot of sense. Some of it's for tone. I also understand that concept. But if we really want to break it down, like back in the day, they had guitar amps that if like every stereo, if you turn it all the way up, it sounds like crap. And these amps were supposed to be perfectly clean, but when you turned it up and it sounded like crap, it actually sounded good. And that's kind of where like overdrive and distortion came from. And that's why people would have their amps cranked up to 1,000,000 because that's where it sounds the best, which also makes sense. If you're filling an arena, you can turn a 100-watt amp up to 1,000,000 and it sounds great because that's what happens, et cetera, et cetera. But that's, you know, it sounds good in your basement, yes, but when you put it in a whole band, it's that whole thing where what if everyone wants to crank up loud or you're trying to just use the dial behind you to crank up to make sure you can hear yourself, you kind of offset the, like, I don't know, say like audio aesthetics of the stage where it's like, I have to crank it up so I can hear myself because I can hear the other person on the side of the stage. Correct. But there's this weird thing where like guitar amps are usually like at your ankle. Or like, even if you have a 4x10, it comes up to your hip and it's not pointing at your head.
It's
so
pointing at me.
Yeah, all the sound goes like right past your waist, out into the crowd and just blows everyone away and you can't hear it on stage, where it took me a long time to realize, yes, trust the sound person. If they tell you to turn it down, and then just tell them to turn it up in your monitor, you know? And I mean, it's a thing that even people who use monitors, I think, forget or don't trust the monitors. They're like, I want to be able to hear myself like blasting out into the crowd through the mains, through my setup that I have back here, whatever it is. And it's like, no, if you're on stage, just delete everything else and only trust your monitor. Like, I get it's weird when you go to the other side of the stage. That's where in-ears come in handy. But yeah, you bring up a valid point, and I do want to like absolutely back you up on it that I have also been that guy. I mean, like there's guitar stuff around here that's too loud for anywhere I would ever play, and I've used it a lot, and it's it's not necessary, you know, which is why I carry around a 30-watt amp, which still at like 3 out of 12 is almost too loud for most small bars and clubs.
Yes, and another thing too with like effects pedals and especially in the digital world now, you can emulate all that distortion. You can emulate different cabinets too. Like you can emulate a Marshall cabinet, you know, even though you might have a PV or whatever. And that's kind of nice because then you can get that sound without driving. So what happens is, like on a tube amp, when you turn it up so loud, the tubes actually saturate. And that's when they get distorted. And that's what they call even harmonics. So it's distortion, but to us, especially with the guitar, it adds a little bit of grit and stuff to the sound. Well, to get that sound, you literally had to overdrive the tubes to do that. Well, now with digital stuff, they can recreate that digitally, so you physically don't have to have it blasting. You know, like you said, 100-watt amp wide open to get that, you know, that distorted sound. They can do it. So yeah, so it's been changing a lot too. There's a few traveling bands that they go through a modeling pedal and they just have it direct out, and either they have in-ears, you know, or they run back through monitors. So some bands, they don't even have a stage amp anymore.
Yeah. I've played in bands that were like that. I mean, in one of those racks, there's like a digital amp modeler that like was just a cheap one that I bought to fit in, just so I could do the like practices and things like that, because they did silent practices, which like it works when you practice that way and you figure it all out. But again, it's weird to people that they have to have the feeling on the stage, or like, which again, I get it.
I get it too, because so when I first started doing live sound, I actually started on stage doing like multi-monitor mixes. Okay. So even with national acts like Blue Oyster Cult, Grand Funk Radio, 38, I mean, some older bands, but still some big bands. Yeah. And I loved it because when you're on stage, I'm off to the side, but I'm still up there with the band, right? I can hear the stage and hear the monitors and stuff. So I understand where they're coming from with having a certain sound on stage, you know? And like I said too, you need a little bit of that volume for energy. You know, it's just, but there's a fine line between having it loud and like, you know, over the top. Because I've worked with some bands, some rock bands that were heavy guitars, and the guitars were always so loud, I had problems getting the vocals to cut through.
That's, you know, something else I've heard at places where like the sound person's like, this guitar is so loud that I'm not even going to send them through the PA, and now I have to make the PA match how loud this guitarist is.
In vocal, like even these mics here, you know, if I step back, they pick up everything a lot more than you realize. So if there's a guitar that's really loud on stage, their vocal mic is also picking up that loud guitar. Yeah. And they're trying to sing like this. Yeah. In the meantime, it's picking up their guitar. Exactly. So when I try to turn their vocal up, I'm also turning up their guitar too. So it's like I'm fighting it.
Yeah, it's like the snake eating its own tail kind of deal. It's like I'm trying to get out of here, but that's wild. I guess
so it makes it interesting.
Yeah, I've run into that like a little bit, because I'm not like I've done enough stuff with sound that I understand the concepts when they're explained to me like that. You know, Brad's another person that's really good at explaining sound concepts.
Yeah, Brad's amazing.
Yeah. So like with that one, I've run into that one with like podcasts where if we have like, let's say like 4 or 5 people at a table and we're doing a podcast together, if somebody like turns away and they start getting quieter, and then it's like, well, now I have to turn their mic up. But if somebody replies to them, then everything's echoed now because the person across the room talking at a normal volume, it double, you know, like you're just amplifying it coming into the microphone you turned up, and it comes later because sound takes a while to travel. Yes. And it's a weird thing that I guess I never really thought about until I was starting to dink with it. I'm like, oh, this is weird. I'm getting this echo, and that was why the echo was in there. And I had to do a little post-production and get rid of some of the stuff and whatever. But yeah, like that's I don't know. There's a lot of weird concepts like that people don't think about with sound. Right. Because I think a lot of people are just like, well, if I put 2 speakers up and a 4-channel mixer and it's loud, that's good enough. But again, like, it took me a long time to let me bounce this idea off of you. So the idea of removing sound to get the levels correctly as opposed to adding sound in. So when people are just like, I need more vocal in my monitor, sometimes it's like, well, I could turn it up more, but if I just turn everything else down a little bit and then turn the whole monitor up a little bit, and then now we're at a place where everything else is, I don't know. I would used to just keep turning it up, and it's like, well, it's turning red, and it's like, I don't care, just keep turning it up. He said he wanted more vocals, just put more vocals in there, you know. It took me a while to realize the concept of you can take stuff away and make it sound better. Than it doesn't always have to get added in. No,
you're absolutely right. So a lot of times when I'm mixing, you know, you got all your input channels off to the side, but right in the middle I have like all my DCAs are all my groups, right? So I have like one fader for the whole drum kit, one fader for the bass, one fader for all the guitars. If there's 2 or 3 guitars, one fader for all the vocals. You know, okay. Plus I have the individual levels of each vocal. But so like when a band's playing, like during solos and stuff, I can turn all the guitars up with one fader, right? Like during their leads and stuff. But when the singer starts singing, and the vocals start kicking in, I can bring that fader down just a little bit, and then the vocals will pop up because I turn the guitars down so the vocals stay on top. So when they're singing, you can still hear his words. And then when they go back into the leads or whatever, then I can turn the guitars back up and bring them back more in the mix.
Dude.
So you're right. So so you're doing that a lot. So instead of like turning the vocals up, I would just bring the guitars back a little bit, and the vocals would pop out.
They pop out, yeah. Dude, that's crazy too, because you're talking like grouping stuff together, like, you know, the whole drum set, you mix everything individually, but then it goes into one channel.
Yeah,
that
then
you
I
can
have
turn
one
up.
fader that can turn the whole drum kit
That's
up and
wild.
down.
So you're like patching basically at that point, which is like with digital stuff makes it so easy.
It is, yeah.
With analog stuff, could you imagine? Well, I mean, you had to do it. Like, imagine the amount of junk it would take on a tabletop to mix all that stuff in. Where like this is the drum fader. Like, it'd be a lot of work, honestly. Like, that's probably why you're so thankful for digital stuff. You know.
Well, so I have like a minus M32. It's like a 40 channel digital board, and it's, you know, it's only this big. If it was analog board, it would probably take up like 2 tables. It would be huge.
Yeah.
You know? So they're taking all that and sticking it into a compact surface, but like the faders do multiple things. Like sometimes they're a channel fader, sometimes they're an output fader, you know, for like an auxiliary send or an effect or something.
And that's why when you're pushing buttons,
yes, everything's moving around because everything's in layers instead of being all strung out in one big unit.
Genius. That is so genius. Oh my gosh.
So once you get used to the console, you can move around on it pretty fast. You just have to, you know, you have to select everything. So you have to just make sure you're always on the right channel and the right layer so you don't all of a sudden change something. All of a sudden, oh shoot, I thought I was on the guitar channel. I'm on the vocal channel. So you have to really pay attention. But once you get used to it, it follows you pretty easily.
I think it's probably also one of those things where it's hard to learn all this stuff all at once. You know, like you kind of almost have to start with a little 4-channel mixer and work your way up. And it's just like, all right, we're adding stuff in. Here's a bigger mixer, and we're adding more stuff in. And then you get a digital
that's
one.
how I learned, right?
You know, and then that's kind of what I watch you and Brad and people like run basically like Soundcrafts or Behringer XA type, you know, those types of like tablet run or computer monitor type run, you know, mixers or digital mixing consoles. And it's like, oh, this is where you set your gain, this is where you set your levels, and this is where you can add in effects, and this is where you can add in things like compression and limiting, and this is where you can like set the parameters for those types of things. And then, you know, then I just like watch Brad run. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, these are groupings. And it's like, how'd you set those up? You know, like it's eventually you just start to, after you figure all this stuff out, you just want to add another thing and add another thing and add another thing in there. And that's what I think is like neat about those. But it's like you said, sometimes you can like start pushing buttons and you're like, I don't even know what setting I'm in now. And I pushed a thing and now it's like different. I wish there was like an undo button for those, you know?
Sometimes on some boards there is. There's I was at I've helped out at Pearl Lake Church, and they switched boards. They had a different Yamaha board that I wasn't that familiar with, and they had 2 services. The first service went fine, and I was doing something with the board, pressing some buttons, and all of a sudden it reset itself. So like all the channels went back to 0, everything. So I was like, uh-oh.
Oh, no.
What do I do?
Oh, man.
So I talked to Nathan was the music director. So I'm like, you know, they purchased the board. I'm like, Nathan, I go, now what do I do? But I was able to get the channels back, but everything was reset. So I had to re-EQ everything and set all the settings. Luckily, I had just done a service with all the same channels, so it didn't take me very long to go through the drums and EQ the kick drum a little bit. So probably about within 15, 20 minutes, I had a pretty decent mix. I had my mix back, but it was insane. And to this day, I still don't know what I did. I must have got into the store area and reset something that I didn't even mean to do.
That's
so
crazy.
I know.
That's so wild.
That's only happened to me once. So
that's especially doing that live. That would be like the most stressful thing ever, because it's like you're the one responsible for everyone's good time. Yes, the band has to play music, but like it's not coming out unless the sound guy is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And because there's time between services, so it was at the end of a service. We had like a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever. So from the time I realized what I did, I was able to start fixing stuff already before the second service came. So it wasn't completely terrible.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a complete train wreck, but as far as digital boards, you really have to pay attention to what you're doing because
100%.
you can cause issues.
Gosh, that's so crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy.
So let's go back to like, you said you were like maybe in your early 20s or just out of like around college age, and your girlfriend's dad was running sound, and that was the spark for you to run sound. And
Just
like,
instant.
did your dad have a setup, or did you have a setup, or like how did you go about getting a PA, or did you just kind of start running sound on other people's PAs?
No, so I started, and I'm still doing the same thing I'm doing today. I started helping set up, carrying stuff in, plugging in stuff, wrapping up cords.
Yep.
Just being at the show, right? Just being around him, watching him mix and run sound. And then he knew I was in it because we would visit and talk. And then a couple of times he would like let me sit at the soundboard for a little bit, and mix. He's like, okay, when he goes up and does a lead, turn. Well, Dean Morris was the lead guitar player for the ski band. He's like, turn Dean up a little bit, during his leads and bring him back. And then one thing he always told me, it stuck to my head, is like when the band's playing, when they're singing, make sure you can always hear the vocals.
Yes.
That's the main thing. You can hear guitars, but you want to hear them sing. So he taught me pretty much the basics of mixing. Like, hey, vocals should be on top, and when they're doing their leads, that's going to be a little bit above the vocals, drums, so they're not overpowering everything, but you want to hear all the drums, the bass and snare and everything, because that's the rhythm section, right?
Yep.
That's what keeps everything going, drums and bass. So he kind of taught me a little bit about how to mix and where things are supposed to sit when you're listening, what you want to hear at different times. So then, as time went on, he started doing some stuff for Iowa Central, and then I was filling in for him. So, like, the sound system would be set up. I would just have to run the faders. Okay, so I started doing little things like that, or like we would do an event where there'd be an opening band, and I would mix the opening. I would do sound for the opening band, and then Ed would take over and do the headliners and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I started to learn, was just little bit at a time, piece by piece.
I mean, you brought up a good point. Sometimes just being around it is enough to kind of help wrap your mind around exactly like how much work goes into it, what it takes, and like what's going on. Helping plug in stuff and wrap cables, even just like, it's so weird to be like, just putting in your time, or paying your dues. But essentially there's a reason that's a thing. If you're around it, you just kind of start to absorb it. You sit there and watch them run sound. It's like, they're doing stuff, and it's like, well, what did you just do there? And they can explain it to you, and as opposed to just going in headlong and being like, I think I can do this, and then just not having any clue. And then after the whole show's over, you go ask somebody like, hey, how could I improve on what I just did? That's not maybe not be the best way to learn, but I think you took the right route, even though you, like we talked about earlier, you had some background in running electronics and doing things like that. It was nice to have somebody else around. How'd you end up with like a PA then? Because I know you do have a PA.
I do now. So, man, I wish I would have started sooner, but I've always worked with like Ed Wilson back then, the ski band. Ed passed away in 2006. But he had a heart transplant, so he lived like 12 years with a heart. So he did,
Whoa.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That's crazy. Cool.
So then we were doing shows. At that time, after Ed passed away, Gene Walker and myself, we still continued to do shows. And at that time, we had SKB Sound and Lighting. And Ed and I, we kind of started that where I took some of my money and bought some equipment, and we did some shows, and we just put all the money to buy equipment to get things started. So I've always had like equipment, but I never owned my own sound system because I always worked with like Gene and myself worked together, and I worked with Andy Anderson, at Concert Sound Productions. So I always worked with people that had equipment, but I always had stuff to add too. Like I had some of my microphones, I had a big soundboard, but it wasn't until about 2016, I think, I decided, hey, I'm not getting any younger, I want to continue to do this. So I started buying my own equipment. And now I have my own stuff, my own trailer. So that's been nice, but it took a while to build that up.
Yeah.
And that stuff's not cheap. And
yeah. Oh man.
I bought it a little bit at a time. So it took years.
I would almost argue that like PA equipment is some of the stuff that people like to cheap out on the most, but I honestly think that most PA equipment is like some of the most impactful. If you buy cheap, you kind of get what you pay for.
Exactly.
I mean, it
Yes.
happens that way with guitars and basses and amps and stuff, but you can kind of church those things up and make them sound good again for not very much money. Or, you know, honestly, some of them don't sound too bad. But yeah, like I have a pair of cheap PA speakers over there that are just like, if you put them next to like a pair of EVs, it's like, oh, I get it now. I get it now. Like, otherwise noise comes out of them, and some people, that's all they want. But I mean, like you brought up a really good point, like about vocals. You know, sometimes people don't really care as much about the vocals, but like I always, you know, I try to mix sound, you know, as an adult now, you know, going and mixing shows, when if I do it for like Jesse or whatever, it's like vocals first. You know, they came to listen to him sing words. I didn't come to listen to him play acoustic or me play acoustic or to Cole play drums or to whatever, you know, no offense to any of us, but like people attach themselves to the words, you know, and so I wanted to like kind of touch on that a little bit. But also another thing that you brought up was like reinvesting in yourself. Like you had talked about like you and Gene and whoever else, you'd okay, we got to get stuff, you know, like, so it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to run sound, and then we're going to take the money we made and we're going to reinvest it back into getting better or new stuff or bigger stuff or whatever we need, you know. And sometimes that's like the hard part about, you know, running it as a business, where like it all depends on what you want to do, but some people just kind of do it for fun, and
It's tough.
it's not easy. It's not easy. And like, okay, so like another thing I want to say is like hats off to the sound guy, because like, again, usually if it's like, well, the band's got to be here to sound check 2 hours before the show. Well, guess what? The sound guy has to be set up and ready for the band 2 hours before the show. So he's there an hour or two before that. You know, sometimes it starts to be like pretty weird when you're the sound guy. Cause I mean, like I've been to shows where you've run sound and I've helped you like break down. And sometimes it's like almost 3 a.m. and we kind of finally got all this stuff in the trailer. Like, dang, you know, and that's why sound guys deserve to get paid, you know, but
Yeah, we're usually the first ones at the venue and usually the last ones to leave. And I've done so many events where, because it's just me. Well, Aaron's been helping me. Aaron's been awesome help. But you know, you show up and because the budget around this area is pretty low. You know, they want to have bands, but there's like they don't have the money. I'm like, well, I need to make some money.
Yeah,
and I have nice equipment. But anyway, so I'll do events and they'll say. And they'll top me down in price. I'm like, are you going to have, oh, yeah, there'll be plenty of guys to help. I'm like, okay. So usually I have help setting up. And at the end of the night, when everything's done, the band's gone, and I'm turning around looking, and I have this PA sitting there and all these microphone cables and microphones, and I'm looking, and there's no one around. I was like, what happened to all this help that I was supposed to have, you know?
Yeah.
And so usually people are pretty excited for setting up. You know, that's exciting. But at the end of the night, you know, and it's midnight, 1 o'clock, whatever, everybody's drunk and they're ready to go home, you know. But so that happens quite a few times, actually.
Yeah. Well, there's something weirdly soothing in my soul about wrapping cables up and just putting them away. I don't know what it is. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just like, I want to hear the song Closing Time while I'm doing it. You know, I don't know.
No, it's, even though I've listened to music all night or all day, whatever, usually tearing down, sometimes we'll even plug in a powered speaker and plug our phone just to have some music, you know, not loud, just to have some music. So it's not quiet, or you listen to the birds chirping, you know, whatever.
Exactly. Oh man. Yeah.
No, you're right.
That's definitely one of the things I don't know. The sound person, like, you've probably seen it evolve over time enough too, back to like, I mean, back in the day, there was just like, we're doing a street dance. They just like tap into the power line, you know, and like stuff like that, you know, which like nowadays is like, no, let's do a generator and be a little safe about this, you know, but like you've probably seen enough things change over time where like now you probably don't need as many cables as you used to, what I was also assume.
Exactly. Yeah. So, like back in the analog day, we would have, an analog front of house console for the audience, another analog board for the monitor mixes for the band. Right. So each one of them and so we have a snake, and it was a splitter snake. So you had to plug all your 24 channels into the snake, plug another 24 channels into the monitor board, plug the other 24 channels in the front of house board, and then plug in all your EQs for your monitor mixes and your power amps. In front of house, I had 3 layers of inputs and outputs. So I had the inputs from the stage, I had all the outputs for the effects units and the equalizers and all that. Then I had inputs for all the effects returns, your stereo return for your delay, reverb, chorus. So yeah, it would take me almost a half hour just to plug everything into the console, to physically plug everything in. It was in 3 layers. And so now with my Midas M32, I have a digital snake. Everything plugs into the digital snake, all your inputs. I have one Cat 5 cable that goes to the board, and it's done. I don't have to plug another, ins and outs and stuff out. And then if we add a monitor board, same thing. Another Cat 5 cable goes to another M32 or X32, and our monitor board is set up. And you just have the output. If you have 5 outputs, you just have 5 outputs from the monitor console going to the speakers. So it is way different. It used to be so much more compact, less equipment. So yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, it just makes me think about it's the only thing I can liken it to if somebody doesn't have any clue like what we're talking about. Like the microphone is a cable that goes into the mixer. It's like, well, what if you want to send that into any sort of effect like reverb or delay or chorus or compression or limiting you got to get another cable and plug it into one of those things. It's like, well, how do you get it from the reverb to the compression? It's like, well, you have to have another cable to plug it into that one, all the way down the line, all the way back over. That sounds like such a freaking mess. It's almost like you're building a 24 channel pedal board from scratch, like a guitar pedal board. I couldn't imagine what it would take to do that.
No, so we had a 56 channel snake that plugged into the back of the analog board. They have some were like 1/4-inch inserts, some were XLR inputs out. I mean, all different combinations of the plugs, for the effects and compressors, and because each unit had to be plugged in individually.
Yep.
And digital, it's built into the board.
Yep.
And you just have to select it, digitally routed, to get it. You don't have to have a physical rack of everything. It's all yeah.
Yeah, you can run stuff like that with like a tablet nowadays, which is like even crazier to me to think that like that's a thing. But that also explains like why like at some shows we've run sound with you and it's like we were trying to hook up a second tablet so you could have 2 tablets, which like I did not understand until now, where you're just like, well, it's what you're used to from the analog days. Was like I had a board here and I had a board here and I'd run them both independent of one another. It was easier than it was to go switch back and then forth and then back and then forth and then back and then forth, which again, now that makes sense to me, having understand, like in the analog days, I guess I never really thought about it. You used to have those.
Well, and then like, my Midas M32 has like a control surface, so I have physical faders to move, and I have the whole console in front of me. Well, with the tablet, you're limited to only like 8 channels at a time instead of 16 or whatever. But if I have 2 tablets, I have a bigger work surface to work with. So I could have one tablet have my effects, so I could change my delay real quickly if I need to. And the other tablets, I can have the faders, so I can change levels.
Yep.
So it just makes it easier when I don't have a control surface and I'm just using tablets or a laptop. If I have two different control surfaces, it makes it easier for me.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why. Is for convenience only.
I totally get it though too, because it's like when somebody's just like, "Can I get a little bit more guitar in my monitor?" and you're like, "Yep, hold on, just a second, and okay, play." Like, because you have to like flip through all the stuff.
It takes just a little bit, yes.
And then then you're just like, wait, what was I doing? Oh yeah, I was adjusting, the parameters on the delay. Okay, got to go back to here and then over to here and that channel. It takes a while if you just have one. So
yeah,
but that's wild. Okay, so you start kind of gaining all your own gear. Like, how did you end up? For those that don't know, Abate, which was in Humboldt for a while, now it's in Algona, was a big freaking deal. Like,
that was a big deal.
I understand it's bikers and stuff, and maybe you don't like bikers, but whatever. There were a lot of people in Humboldt when it was in Humboldt, and now it's in Algona, and there's a lot of people that show up to that. So how did you end up getting involved in that?
Through Andy.
Okay.
Yeah, Andy. He had the whole system. He did the whole rally. He did it for years until he passed. I can't remember when he started. It might have been back in the 80s. I'm not sure. But yeah, we got to know Andy just doing some little stuff. And he knew I was learning. I had at that time I had my own monitor board, a big Yamaha, 32 channel. I could do like 12 monitor mixes with it. I knew how to run it, but I was young, new. But they threw me up there on the main stage. The first national act I did monitors for was Blue Oyster Cult. You know,
Cool.
yeah, I was like, you know, in my 20s, mid 20s, and I'm not gonna lie, when they were playing, I was like, just, I was nervous.
Yeah.
But their sound guy, I think his name was Woody at the time, he helped me go through the monitors, get the monitors set for him, and he was an awesome guy. And as they were playing, he had them so close, I just had to turn a few things up or down.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really easy. But I mean, it was Blue Oyster Cult, right? I'm sitting and they're listening to what my mix is, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's what they're hearing.
It was pretty cool.
To literally monitor what their sound is.
And I did okay. Like and I knew frequencies. Like I knew like if something was feeding back, I'm like, okay, well that sounds like it's about 2,500 hertz. You know, you just pick that up by ear, you know, and just experience. With digital now, it's a lot different because they have like real time analyzers.
Yeah.
So I can walk up to the microphone and make it squeal and look at the tablet and it'll say, okay, oh, that's 1,600 hertz. So I grab the EQ and point it down and feedback's gone. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it takes like a fraction of a second to EQ something for feedback with digital. Mm-hmm. And then before you'd have to make something and then you'd have to run to the equalizer and change it, walk back to the microphone, check it and see if, so it's, yeah, things have changed a lot.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I mean, I remember something like, I can't remember if we were dinking with it, we turned it on by accident or what it was, but it was like you said, it was a real-time analyzer that would like, basically it was like a feedback suppressing something or whatever. And if it just, basically it would just shut off a frequency if feedback came through it. And based on how we had everything set up, it was just taking like a huge hunk of frequencies out, and that was like, why does the whatever sound like crap tonight?
That happened on Jesse's board.
Yeah, that was on Jesse's board. And it was like, what is the deal with this?
So, yeah, and it was weird. And I didn't know that was turned on, right? It's automatic feedback suppression. Mm-hmm. And
that's what it was,
so on the subwoofers, you're just giving it bass, like the low frequencies. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that was engaged. Well, it thought all those low frequencies were feeding back. So it was trying to cut them out, and I was trying to boost them.
Yeah. Which like, again, that's,
I was fighting the board.
Yeah, you're chasing your tail on that stuff, and that's
and I didn't realize at the time, and I got to looking at it and it was like a shaded background on the screen, and it had all these frequencies like everything was swooped down. I'm like, what is that? And then I seen it was the automatic feedback was engaged, and I disengaged. All of a sudden, boom, boom. I'm like, oh, there it is.
There's all the noise.
Like, no wonder.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, again, the digital boards can get really wild. But so I want to talk Blue Oyster Cult. Who are some of the other bands? Because I know Abate used to have some really cool bands come through. And I mean, I get it. They're not today's bands or whatever. But I grew up listening to those those types of bands. So
oh man, like
Foghat, I think was another one that might have went through.
Yeah, Foghat. There's been some. I'm terrible at names of bands, but yeah, 38 Special was one of them. Yeah. And more recently, the band that says, can I say Crazy Bitch?
Yeah. That band. I don't remember what their name is. Hinder? No. Buck Cherry?
Buck Cherry, yeah.
There we go.
So I worked with Buck Cherry. There's been so many bands. Not Widow 7. Widow 7's a local band. But there's another band, 7 Up. They used, I helped them with monitors. They used my PA for side fills. It was crazy. But yeah, Hinder. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been all kinds of bands.
Yeah.
That I've worked with.
Yeah,
it's been so fun. Another thing that's changed a little bit with national bands, national acts, is because of digital and everything being more compact. A lot of times now they're coming self-contained. Okay. To where they'll show up, they'll have their own microphones, their own soundboard, like for their in-ear mixes and stuff. Mm-hmm. So they set all their stuff up on stage, and then they just give us an output. Like they'll give us 16 channels. Like, okay, here's the kick drum, snare, and then we just plug that into the PA, mm-hmm. and then they go.
Yep.
Where before they would show up and we would supply all the microphones, we would supply all the monitors. Yep. So they had to use whatever equipment that we had. Especially doing events and motorcycle rallies and stuff.
Oh, that'd be really tough though, like from a band's perspective, because you wouldn't. It'd almost be like every time you went on stage, you played a different guitar and a different amp. Like it would be so weird. Which I guess you're kind of used to, going to jam nights and stuff or whatever. You get used to it, whatever. But you don't want to be on the foreign PA system if you're used to yours, and you have it all set up.
Yeah. So So that's how they used to do it, because it would, sometimes they would have all their own stuff, but can you imagine having this big soundboard, monitor board? It would take another semi for them to be self-contained.
Yeah, you're talking Grateful Dead stuff.
Yeah,
at that point,
and now they can have all their stuff in a couple racks,
Yeah, I remember
because their microphones are wireless, their in-ears are wireless, so there's less cables.
Yep. Yeah, I saw some, whatever band breakdown gear, whatever nonsense thing on YouTube, and that was like, I think it was Devin Townsend, whatever, and he had like all of his stuff was like in one rack, and he's like, I have one of these and everyone else on the stage has one of these, and so like there's like what 5 or 6 racks that get rolled onto stage, and that's all that's sitting back there, nothing else. And it's like, all right, and like you said, they just give that to the sound guy, and it's like, yeah, this is the output from this rack, and
it's crazy,
and use it, and it's crazy to think that that's a thing. I mean, I understand, like, I feel like there was a weird time in the 80s where people started blending analog stuff into rack stuff and digitizing things a little bit, but it didn't really take off until, I would say like pretty recently, like maybe last 10 years tops, like 5 to 10 years. It's been a pretty big deal to see bands coming in self-contained with digital mixing stuff.
Yes. So when digital first came out, they had big boards. They were expensive and they sounded digital. Like they didn't sound, in fact, the analog stuff sounds so good that they're trying to recreate that in the digital world. Mm-hmm. So the sound quality of analog stuff is top notch.
Yep.
In fact, they're trying to recreate that analog sound digitally, and they're getting a lot closer now. So now the analog boards are sounding really good. They're sounding a lot better. They're doing a lot better job modeling. Mm-hmm. The circuits, like the tube circuits, analog tube circuits.
Oh yeah.
So the digital stuff, and it's getting more compact. The processing power is getting better, as time goes on.
Yeah, and
it's pretty amazing.
There's a little bit of appeal for that weird, I want to say like weird digital sound from like the 80s into the 90s and stuff. But I every now and then I'll see a guitarist with like one of those like 90s gray Digitech whatever things on his pedal board, and it's like those things are crap. It's like you got to know how to use them to get the sound you want out of them, and it's, I don't know, like digital stuff is also, it takes a while to learn, to figure out, because it's so layered. It's not like all the knobs, like you have to dig into the settings to change it. Now all the knobs do something else, and you punch a couple buttons and now all the knobs do something else. And
so I was I was totally intimidated with digital when it first came out. Mm-hmm. Like, because I'm used to buttons assign, like you look at the board, okay, yeah, I need to assign this to group 1, group 2, of course it's big, right? You have all these knobs and buttons and stuff, but I knew what they did, so
and when you twisted on something, it responded the way it was supposed to. And
so I'm used to everything being in front of me. So now you have this digital console that has 40 some channels, and it's, it sits on your lap basically, and you're going, okay, what? So it took me a while to jump into that, and things are very, like groups are like subgroups of subgroup, but the way they do it, analog and digital, is a little different, But yeah, once you learn it though, it's pretty cool.
I feel like that's the way most technology goes. Once you figure out how to use it to your advantage, it becomes advantageous. That's no different than like a computer versus like an actual desk and a piece of paper, or like people with AI. Like it's no different than like, if you use it the right way, it can actually be quite useful and do a lot of really neat things. But otherwise it's, it is what it is.
And what's interesting, so like these, I'm in my 50s. So when I say younger, I mean even in their 20s and 30s, these younger people that are coming up learning sound, they grew up with computers. Yeah. So for them, a digital board is second nature to them, because they understand it. If you grab this and pull it down, it changes the sound. They might know exactly what they're doing, but they know if I do this and this, it changes the sound. Mm-hmm. And they get that figured out pretty easily. They can see it. It's more visual. Mm-hmm. Where if you gave them an analog board, they would just stand there and look at it and go, what's this do? Because they can't put their finger on it and move it, like the touch screens and stuff today. Yeah. So it's interesting how the newer generation picks up to digital a lot better than I did, But it'd be the same thing. Like if they went to an analog board, they'd look at that and go, what is this crazy thing?
I think some of that is also like being able to visualize it. Because like on the analog stuff, you couldn't really visualize it unless you had a meter. Correct. That was about the best you got, was a meter. Yes. Or maybe a light that would turn green to yellow, red. Mm-hmm. Those are like the the best you had.
You're right.
But at least with the digital stuff, you can actually see like this is the way the EQ wave looks, and you can be like low pass, high pass to here and there, and it's close enough and whatever. You can really kind of wiggle it around and move it. You start to figure it out a lot faster than, if you. I'm sure once again you're used to the knobs, so like if you had the knobs, you could figure it out. And
I love knobs.
Well, you'd be able to see it. You'd be able to see it in your mind. I think is like you had to make the wave in your mind. Be like, I know if I do this, this, and this, it would make something like this. But as far as being able to control it on a surface, it was just new to you at the time. And now I'm sure you're very thankful for it. So you don't have to have 2 trailers instead of just one to haul your sound system everywhere.
Well, then there's lighting.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So no, in fact, I need to get a bigger trailer. So I have like 7 by 14 trailer with the Vino, so it's actually over 16 feet long. My sound system fits in it just fine, but then when you start adding lights and trussing and stuff like that, that starts taking up room.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you'll have like a lighting guy that has his own trailer with lights and trussing and stuff.
And
then
cabling.
And then you'll have the sound guy with the sound system and his cablings and stuff. And I'm trying to do both.
Yeah.
So it's like
that's the other thing is like I bet you're thankful though that sound or that lighting has changed with sound though, because like I remember when I first started playing music, Lefties in Des Moines still had bulbs, like the bulbs or whatever.
Boy, yeah.
And they upgraded to LEDs, and now it's like 20 degrees cooler on stage. It's insane how like hot they are and how much energy they took and et cetera, et cetera. Now it's got to be, I don't know. They're lighter now. You can like have housings made out of plastic, and it's, I guess as long as you're nice to them, or whatever. But still, like it doesn't take as much. Like back, you used to have like heavy duty trusses to hold the lights.
Oh yeah, I mean it'd be nothing to have. If you had a big lighting system, it would draw almost 100,000 watts. Just for the lighting. I mean, you're talking that would run like 2 blocks of houses, or whatever, just for the stage lights. Yeah, it's insane. No,
that's why back in the day they were tapping into power lines to do this.
They had to. So that's dropped by a third at least with LED lights.
That's crazy.
Because like each par can would have a 600 to 1,000 watt bulb in each light, like a regular incandescent bulb, and that's. Well, a hair dryer is like 1,500. So it'd be, if you had 2 lights, it'd be running like 2 hair dryers. You imagine if you had like 50 or 60 hair dryers going at one time, how much power it would take.
That's insane.
So yeah, it would take an extreme amount of power just to handle the lighting system.
Wow. Yeah, that's so wild. I think about like that kind of stuff, how it's changed over time, and I don't know, maybe that's just the life lesson we all need to draw out of this is just like change with the times. Everything's going to get a little bit better if you do, and I know we can all just look back nostalgically at the past and be like, I can't believe we all used to do that. Like, I don't know, that's crazy. I feel like we're getting close to an hour here. I feel like we covered a fair amount, but I feel like you've got a lot of stories left to tell. So maybe
I get sidetracked easy.
Well, so do I. But that was one of the reasons I liked, having you as a sound guy at a show. I'd show up and it's like, oh, Mark's running sound, cool. And it's like, well, on breaks and stuff, we'd sit out in the parking lot and talk, and we just talk the whole break, and then it's like, oh, we got to go back and play more music, and you got to run sound, and it's like, oh. Okay, and you're easy to talk to, and I think your talking style kind of matches mine because I like to go off on tangents quite a bit. So,
no, I love doing this. I love working with the bands. I love it, like when a band plays and if it sounds good for the band, they usually perform so much better. Like if they can hear really well. Because it's easy for them to play. They don't have to think about it. It's like, man, I really got to listen to my guitar. And so they usually put on a better performance. And to be a part of that, to like when everything has to come together, right? You have to have good talent, right?
True,
you got to have good talent, good sound system, speaker. But when everything comes together, it's just freaking amazing. And it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And the crowd's loving it and the band's just having a blast. And that's what I love about it. And going out and meeting people and talking with you and working with Jesse and all these great bands and local bands and regional and even national bands I've worked with. It's just amazing. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I love it.
That's crazy. Yeah, don't know. There's so much. I just want to like jump in on like half of what you're saying and be like, yes, I agree, but I didn't want to stop your flow of conversation because you were making some good points there. And yeah, I'm glad you're around. I'm glad to have you. I'm glad people like you are passionate about this because the one thing I want to pull out of what you said is it's more fun when it sounds good.
Yes,
it's more fun. You know, I'm used to going places and the sound isn't very good on stage, and I don't want to like argue with people about it. And you just like, can you turn me up? If they do, it's like, well, whatever. I don't care. I'll just play. I can hear myself well enough. It's fine. But the thing I always think to myself is like, it's just not as fun. Right. I'd be enjoying myself more if I was at work and, everything worked fine, or whatever. But if it doesn't, you're just kind of like, okay, I guess I'm just at work now, so, yeah, I appreciate you. I'm glad there's sound men like you out there, sound people, running sound and doing what they're doing. Cause I'm not cut out for it. Like if it's not a 4-channel mixer, I don't want to run it. No, I'm just kidding. But
and I'm not cut out to be the lead front man on the stage singing either. So it takes both of us it takes all of us, to make this work. And
absolutely,
like I said, when it comes together, it's actually magical. And I've done, even at churches, I've done school plays, musical stuff like that. But even at church, I've had some really good sounding events at churches where the singer's singing good, you can hear good through the PA, it's really smooth. And I've had like the hairs on my arm stand up, before, just from really good performances. You just feel it and you're like, whoa, that's amazing. It's not me, right? It's the performers. But all I can do is try to recreate what they're doing so everybody else can hear it.
Yes.
And that's what a sound guy does, is he recreates what's going on stage, from the stage to the big room or the auditorium or outside, wherever the place is. That's what my job is, So, but it has to start with the entertainment.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
When all that comes together, it's magical. It's awesome.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Mark, I just want to say thanks. I'm definitely bringing you back in. This was tons of fun. It's so wild. I've had a handful of people on here that have never been on the podcast before, but I'm glad you finally came on. I'm glad we got this all worked out and everything. And you brought up a lot of good points, points that maybe people don't understand or haven't ever really thought about, because everyone just thinks the sound guy's just turning volume knobs, and it's not that easy.
It's a lot going on.
It's not that easy.
And there's so much out of your control when you're doing live sound.
Yeah.
Because I said the vocal mics picking up the drums, the loud guitars, where in a studio they usually have separate rooms, so the vocalist is acoustically separated from the rest of the band. And so it makes it tougher when you're doing live sound, because not everything is in your control, you know. And sometimes people like, oh, I can't quite hear the vocals, and I just want to, like, give me a minute. I got some stuff to figure out, Yeah.
You gotta figure out where to shelf all this noise so we can hear the vocals. 100%. I don't know. It's
challenging.
It's
challenging to say that.
It is, yeah. And I mean, again, like that, you're there before everyone. You leave after everyone, and guess what? That's why the sound guy's always eating while you're playing. Because that's the only time they have to eat food.
There's been so many outside events I forgot to eat. Like, because you get there and you start setting up, or we get there, the food's not ready yet, so we start setting up, and I'll go get something. There'll be like a huge line. I'm like, okay, I'll grab something a little bit. And yeah, there's been times where at the end of the night, I'm like, hey, band's down, I'm starving. Oh, shit, there's no food.
Everything's closed now. Yep. That's my classic move. Hey, can I get some food? Yeah, we closed the kitchen an hour ago. It's like, it's 12:30.
I've even asked people. I'm like, well, could you please cook me hamburger? And sometimes they will. There's been a few places where they're like, okay, yeah, we'll make you something. I'm like, thank you.
Well, I used to always order ahead of time, so it's like, can you just cook me a burger and leave it there? I'll pay you for it now and whatever, and I'll come and pick it up or whatever. And it's like, yeah, cool, but then it's not really that good eating a cold burger or like cold pork loin or something. It's just not as good. So, not that I would eat pork. I'm not really a fan of pork, but anyways. Dude, again, this is why I like sitting down talking with you. You and I could just keep going and going and going on this, but yeah, unfortunately, we've got some places to be. So, Mark, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
Can't wait for you to come back, man. Oh, there it is. Episode 230 is in the bank. Mark Gales, what a great guest. He brings up a lot of good points in the episode. One of the things when I was going back through this episode and I took out of it was you kind of got to listen to the sound person, whoever's running sound. For the most part, if you can trust them, it's just like they have your best interest in mind, and they do kind of have your best interest in mind. It's weird because sometimes there's a disconnect between what's going on stage and what's going on out in the audience. Depending on how big the show, it could be a very, very different sound up on stage than what's in the audience, and it's just a concept I think a lot of people don't necessarily think a lot about. And I mean, it's nothing. Maybe I just didn't think about it too much until I started running sound on occasions for like, let's say Jesse Wilson, if I'm playing with him, and a lot of that, believe it or not, is helped out by Mark beforehand, where he'll be like, this is kind of what you got to do, and I'm like, all right, I got it, so he kind of has some presets already in there to give me like a base level of kind of what's going on. But I just don't think about running sound enough. I don't do it enough, and it's interesting to bring them on here and talk about things, because they bring up concepts you might not think about. Like, if the guitar is so loud on stage, the vocal mic's going to pick it up, and then when you turn up the vocals because they're not cutting through, invariably you're also kind of turning up the guitar because that's coming into the vocal mic as well. So it's just weird things like that I never think about too much, and I've just been fortunate enough to play enough types of music in enough types of places for enough years with a bunch of different bands to be able to have seen different scenarios to kind of finally actually understand it as an adult, or an adult, we'll use air quotes on that one. But this great guest, great insight for this episode. I almost actually chopped this all up and tried to make it like linear, so the conversation flowed a little better. But honestly, like that, you're getting what you get, and that's the Audible Farm podcast, baby. You gotta love it. So Mark's run sound for a lot of great bands, a lot of bands I know he named a lot of them in here. So I don't know if there's gonna be any links down below for Mark. I don't know if he's actually got like a Facebook page or something. I never actually asked. But by the time this episode comes out and you scroll down, you'll see it down there. Something will be down there probably for Mark, because he does a lot of great work, and he works with a lot of bands around this area and beyond. He works, different types of festivals and things like that every now and then as well. So, it was great to have him on here. It's just a nice breath of fresh air, a different type of flavor for the podcast, and probably saying some things, like he said, I'm probably making all the guitar players mad. And it's like, well, if you are, that's just the way it is, because believe it or not, I was that guitar player that just had to have a big 4x12 stack and a 100-watt amp on top and just blasting the thing. That's just how I was, and there's people like that, and it took me a long time to be like, all right, I can play almost any place with like a 1x12 30-watt amp, so but it's also to each their own. Music is so invariably something that we all kind of have a different objective to get out of it in the end. So like it or hate it, this was just the advice Mark gave, and whether or not it is your type of advice, that's totally up to you. So thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks once again to Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association for sponsoring this episode. I really appreciate it. Make sure you go check out their podcast, FDT. Episode 3 dropped last week, so make sure you check that one out. Totally great episode. I do also want to say thanks to everybody that's been following us on Facebook and Instagram and X, formerly Twitter, and all over the place. There's a TikTok account out there too, audible.farm. I do not use it, but it's there, I guess. I don't know. Somebody already had Audible Farm, and I'm not going to try and buy it from anybody. So, because that's just how much I'm going to be on there. I don't know. Whatever. It's there. Subscribe on YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube subscribers that have been kind of been popping in since the podcast came back. I really appreciate that. Check out that YouTube channel. I'm always kind of dinking around with it and trying different things and changing some stuff on it, because I like to dink around on YouTube channels because it's fun. So make sure you check that out. Otherwise, everything else you can find audiblefarm.com. Check out the Patreon if you want episodes one day early. It costs $1 a month, or whatever you feel like giving. Otherwise, the shop is there. I do have some shirts left, and I do have some hoodies left, but I still haven't inventoried them, same as last week. So if you want one, hit me up. Maybe I got a size that you have or you need or something. Maybe I don't. I do know the sizes are kind of weird on what I have left. So that's about it. audiblefarm.com. I'm out of here. We'll see you next week. Peace.